everyone, and thanks for joining us. This is part 4 of the Clinical Trial Odyssey brought by the CRO Forum. The Module 4 is an exploration of risk-based monitoring from site perspective. Our presenters today, a panel, if you could see slides there, we've got Nicole Stansbury from PD, Emer from ICON, Crystal Gruetzmacher, Black Hills Cardiovascular Research and Regional Health Clinic, Nicole Ramirez from ICON, and Poindexter from Advances in Health. For more information on all of our webinars and the benefits from society, please visit myscrs.org and the Members Only tab. Immediately following the presentation, you'll be prompted to complete a survey. In order for you to successfully receive your contact hour credit, you must be logged into WebEx as an individual, remain present for the webinar in its entirety, and complete the post-webinar survey. If these 3 requirements are met, you will receive a contact hour certificate via email within 30 days. There is contact hour credit offered for listening to the recording of this presentation. Speaking of the editing survey, it was a 4-part series. There will be a few more questions than usual at the end. We kindly request you complete those. The presenters get a very good response to how the series went, and if they felt that they reached and conveyed some good information. Any questions, you can use the Q&A feature. That's located at the top right of your WebEx screen. It's a little box with a question mark in it, and you can ask questions during the presentation. The webinar will continue for approximately 1 hour, and I'm happy to turn it over to our panel today.
Hi, this is Nicole Stansbury with PPD. I'm Executive Director of Adaptive and Intelligent Monitoring. I've PPD 20 years in various roles, from CRA to project manager to my current role, which is implementing our RBM approach. Prior to my time at PPD, I spent 6 years as a study coordinator at 2 different sites that conducted multi-therapeutic clinical trials. So to, just as a reminder, kind of give everybody a perspective of where we are on the module that we're covering today. The first module in the series was an overview of ICH E6R2, and it talked specifically about the impact that will have on sites, CROs, and sponsors. Went into Module 2 with a focus on the risk management component. In Module 3, we focused on the centralized monitoring piece. So what we want to do is really take a perspective on the impact that this will have on sites. So one of the things that we'll cover today is some of the things that sites may need to consider or recognize that might be different during on-site or remote monitoring visits, as well as any kind of change management activities that you might need to undertake within your organizations to prepare, as we have, from CRO and sponsor level on the changes that are anticipated by these industry guidelines. In addition, we want to make sure that we dispel some of the myths that are out there related to RBM. RBM has been an evolution, so certainly the way that we dipped our toe in the water with RBM 5 years ago is very different than the way that we expect RBM to be delivered today. Technology is advancing at a pace that we've never seen before, and we are having to adjust and adapt our processes, our roles, our responsibilities, our tools, and really, many significant components of our day-to-day job to RBM. We don't expect the changes to be quite as impactful for sites, but I think it's a good opportunity to have a discussion today. And we've got a really good panel. I think we've got some good input from both Crystal and Melissa, who represent sites and have been about these changes with us. So I'm going to go ahead and we'll move through some quick introductions, and then we'll get kicked off on the content today. So Emer, to give a brief introduction?
Sure, thanks, Nicole. Hello, everybody. My name is Emer Doherty. I'm a Senior Director of Clinical Risk Management at ICON. Interestingly, I also started off my life in clinical research working as a study coordinator at a study site in London in the UK, and did that for about 5 years or so before I moved into industry. And my experience is primarily around some CRA work, working most of the time in project management, and more recently moved into a role in clinical risk management where I've been involved in creating processes and adapting to this new way of working in risk-based monitoring. So looking forward to interacting with you all today as we continue in this odyssey or this journey of learning and adapting to working in this risk-based model in order to deliver successful clinical trials for the patients that we all serve. Thank you.
Hi, Crystal. I work as a clinical research coordinator, which I focus mainly on regulatory coordinator goals. I've been here for 15 years with regional health clinical research and Black Hills cardiovascular research. We are part of a large hospital or regional hospital system out in Rapid City, South Dakota.
Hi, everyone. This is Nicole Ramirez. I'm Director in the Clinical Risk Management Group at ICON. Started out my career as a nurse, moved into coordinator, working for phase 1, phase 2 oncology trials, and then moved into the CRA for sponsor, and now I'm currently in the Clinical Risk Management Group here at ICON. Really focusing on trying to help move on the ground, right? So all the expectations are out there and being able to then operationalize that here at a CRO. I'm still working through that process, obviously an ongoing process for all of us. I would expect it to continue to evolve as we continue to learn. So this is very exciting for me to get the site perspective because it's been a while since I've been at the site and really gain that knowledge back from all of you. So thank you for joining.
And Melissa. Melissa?
Yes. Hi, this is Melissa Poindexter. I'm president of Advances in Health. We're a dedicated standalone research site. As president, I'm involved in all aspects of the clinical research trials, and I've been involved in research for 20 years.
Great, thank you, Melissa. The first thing that we'll do today is start off with a polling question. So the first question is, Smite has adapted internal processes to accommodate risk-based monitoring, and the choices are not at all, a little, or very much. So you could all answer this question and let us know how big of a change have you already seen within to make some adaptations to risk-based monitoring. While we're waiting on this poll, one of the things I'd like to do is to ask Crystal and Alyssa if they have any input into sharing the answer to this question from their site's perspective.
Hi, this is Crystal, and I can tell that a little bit. Our site really didn't change a lot of our processes. We have found over the last couple of years, we have been slowly making changes to our processes that really do align with this monitoring. So there wasn't a big change when this came out for us. It is important that sites do need to be self-aware of their own risk areas and then have processes in place to monitor those risk areas or put in place to lower those risks.
Yeah, this is Melissa. So over years, we've increased our quality control measures. The most important things we do, we've developed a detailed checklist for every visit. which includes the procedures for the visit, most importantly, the order that the procedures should occur. Our checklist is more detailed than the study flow sheet. Next, to the SIV visits, we identify risk-based areas and systems in place to prevent deviations. And lastly, while the study is going on, we look for trends and assess them with the team.
Excellent. So I hear that the majority of respondents, the few that did respond, made a few internal process changes. A handful have made several changes, and then there's a handful that haven't made any changes at all. So what will be interesting to see is we'll be asking this question again a little bit further along in the presentation today, and it'll be interesting to see if some of your ideas around what might need to change with your site changes, and if there's still some work to be done to help us prepare for this. So move on then to the next slide, and I'll turn this over here to my colleague.
Thank you, Nicole. This is also Nicole. So let's talk about risk-based monitoring, really focusing on things that matter. So risk-based monitoring, or RBM, focuses on the most critical elements and processes to achieve credible clinical trial results. Ensures, of course, that the rights and safety and well-being of trial subjects are protected. This focus starts out really to focus on error detection, agencies, and then a comprehensive and proactive monitoring activities that focus on preventing or mitigating important and likely sources of error in the conduct, and reporting of creating processes necessary for human subject protection and trial integrity. So I gave a perfect example of what she's done at their site to help think about what they can put in place to reduce error. The focus is on critical data and processes. And those that deserve the most attention relate to eligibility criteria, informed consent, primary endpoints, human safety concerns, investigational products, and really anything that would be the focus of an FDA inspection. And to the critical data and processes, they're focused on patient safety and data reliability, and that remains the same. I don't think that has changed at all. The critical data and processes are, if they're inaccurate or not performed or performed incorrectly, would threaten the protection of human subjects or reliability of the study results. I think the last focus is around central risk indicators, which is really a new aspect for everybody in this model, and bringing technology into play here. So focus on signals that really matter, result in properly allocated resources, low cost and high quality. This analytics is what's been introduced in this model. And it's really the main support in the RBM model. Using risk indicators to identify trends in data that may require additional investigation of the site's organization or how they conduct procedures. And this is where you have to consider some of the operational expectations at your site. So this is probably an area that is a little bit more confusing, I suppose, or new to people. So if you module 3, we're going to talk a little bit more about really what a key risk indicator is, so you understand. So a key risk indicator is a measure that gives an indication of how risky activity or process or procedure might be. And they include thresholds that are critical elements to the successful implementation of a risk-based monitoring methodology. So what does that mean? So you know, there is a difference between a performance indicator and a risk indicator. So for example, a performance indicator in your vehicle would be the speedometer. It tells you one metric, how fast you're driving. Clinical trials, an example of a performance indicator is enrollment rate. And CRAs use these performance indicators to determine how the study is progressing. And that's why we ask you so many questions about site recruitment, so that we can gauge if the actual recruitment rate is really meeting the predicted rate. So that's a performance indicator. A risk indicator is slightly more complicated. Example, As for vehicle, a risk indicator in your vehicle would be the fuel gauge. It's of a performance indicator, which is the number of gallons in your tank, but it also includes additional thresholds which will warn you when you need to fill your gas tank up. If it isn't taken, you obviously have a complication in that you will run out of fuel and you'll be stuck on the side of the road. So a risk indicator really looks at one measurement or one metric, and a risk indicator incorporates additional information about thresholds and certain risks. If nothing done or nothing is investigated, it may have further action, further consequences. So clinical trial, a risk indicator, the number of reported AEs at site is lower compared to all other sites in the same clinical trial. There could be a risk of potential underreporting of AEs, which of course we all know could be critical to the overall success of the study, and require an investigation by the CRA. The CRA in this case may ask questions about how a site obtains, qualifies, reports, and documents AEs, as well as ensuring that the site fully understands the definition of an AE for this particular study. So I think for all of us, the common goal here regarding human subject protection and data reliability hasn't changed. But the full risk indicator analysis does support this model, but it doesn't necessarily indicate that there's something wrong. It allows sponsors and CROs to identify risk early. It helps to target CRA activities to the critical data and processes, help them to work with the sites to perform root cause analysis and assist the sites to correct behaviors, implement process improvements to basically increase quality and maintain patient safety and reliability of the study data. From an operational standpoint, I think it's important that sites must understand that the central data analysis being done in the background is done in real time and must accommodate the time spent with the CRAs to review and investigate these risk indicators. It's about making sure that everybody's in compliance. Yeah. So I mentioned that there's data review that's kind of done in the background, right? So central data review is done in the background. So let's explore that a little bit more. Traditional model, the CRAs spent the majority of their time on site performing source data verification and review of source records. There were few remote data activities that really occurred. And in this model, technology advances, they allow us additional opportunities to review data remotely to detect these trends or quality issues. And these issues can be addressed remotely. From my perspective, you may not understand all of the review methods behind the scenes. You should be assured that the data entered in the CRF or other electronic systems is being reviewed by multiple services. And so see here, 6 different ways data is reviewed remotely. For some studies, there may be more if there's additional vendors involved. So management edit checks or queries, data listings, medical monitoring review, and pharmacovigilance reconciliation are really those types of remote review that you're most familiar with. In addition to those, CRAs will be performing a remote review of CRF data for logic and understanding, not source verification or SDV. And really no need to fax or email source records for this activity. This logic review is really to ensure that the site is entering the data in a legal way that makes sense. And an issue detected, such as a misunderstanding of an IP page, the CRA can contact the site and make sure that they fully understand context of that particular CRF page. And the central monitoring perspective, and performing those risk indicator reviews, the risk indicator data reviews, to identify those sites that may be at risk. And previously discussed, slide went away, so I just want to make sure we're still on. There we go. As we were just talking about risk indicators work, the central monitor may provide their findings to CRA further investigation of the site. And again, risk indicators are not indication of an error. They are a trigger for the CRA and the site to really work together and examine how processes are being performed and ensure the site is compliant. Just into the CRA targeted investigation of these central monitoring findings. CRAs may use remote visits or enhanced telephone contacts to work with the site and ensure compliance and understanding to reduce risk and obviously to ensure the safety of the patient. And this model and the fact that many of the activities are expected to be done remotely, there are considerations from an operational standpoint for the site. And I think first is that sites should understand that timely data entry is imperative because it is being reviewed remotely and in real time. And a long data entry could actually result in a false risk signal during the central data analysis or potentially safety issues for patients during medical review. And the second consideration is to look at the reallocation of the time that they spend with the CRAs. Instead of 8-hour days every 4 to 6 weeks, time may be spent in a 1 to 2 hour phone call at periodic times throughout the life of the study. Really ensure that you're performing things within compliance to solve issues and errors. Will improve the overall quality of the entire study. Next slide. Let's look a little bit at how the tasks of the on-site visit are changing or being reallocated in this model. So on the multiple levels of data review in the RBM model, and to ensure resources are spent in the most efficient manner, the CRA site time while they're on-site together has really changed. In a traditional model, there was no review of data essentially to detect risk. The focus was on after-the-fact corrective actions, CRAs conducting data review and source data verification on site. And history has shown that the actual task of source data verification, or SDV, by CRAs was essentially assuring that the site transcribed the data into the CRF correctly, brings more value to the overall success of the study. And the industry is in agreement that focusing on site process really brings more value to patient safety and integrity of the data. So in the RBM model, technology allows for more of a focus on these key risk indicators from a remote review, resulting in early detection of issues and therefore early implementation and mitigation strategies to improve the quality of the study and also to prevent recurrence of issues. And the slide actually depicts the move from the after-the-fact corrective actions in the traditional model to early detection, proactive prevention in the RBM model. And so using central review of data for key risk indicators, this model creates more on-site time for the CRAs to focus on source data review or how the site is organized to perform procedures, instead of focusing on simply transcription verification. This is a reallocation of tasks by the CRA and site during on-site time because there is more time to work with sites on root cause analysis, process improvement to prevent future error and making sure that the patients are safe. And so the message here is CRAs get to spend quality time with the site personnel working on things that matter, dealing with inconsequential transcription errors. So we talked about the on-site time, and we talked about the multiple data level reviews multiple levels of data review that are being done in the background. So let's talk a little bit about the remote site visits or remote site interactions that occur within this RBM model. And the reallocation of on-site time and the prevalence of this remote data activities, the remote interactions between CRA have changed, or they will change. For the RBM, most CRA interactions occurred only when the CRA was on site. And most times there just wasn't enough time today to get everything done. In this model, we focus on what matters, and technology allows us for identifying risks and error remotely and early, and does not require the CRA to resolve these issues face-to-face. Implementing mitigation strategies to prevent future error in the trial data and in patient safety can all be done remotely. So visits are basically telephone contacts on steroids. They are more thoughtful, they are meaningful, and focus on tasks that don't require the CRA to be on site. This is dedicated time for the CRA and site staff to really perform several tasks together that don't require the CRA to be face-to-face. Actually, many of the tasks that used to be done in an 8-hour day to a focused 1 to 2 hour call. Some of the tasks expected to be accomplished during this time, phone together, include investigation of site issues, trends, and risks, conduct training, target remote EDC for logic review, resolution of outstanding issues. Obviously, we're there to support you and answer questions, provide clarification, and basically anything else that we need to address that require the CRA to be on site. So from an operational standpoint, sites should accommodate the need for these enhanced telephone contacts in lieu of an on-site visit and spend this time with the CRA to ask questions, clarify processes, and express challenges, and anything else that would help support improved quality and overall success of the study. So I'll hand it over to Emer Doherty. She's going to talk about the proven benefits of risk-based monitoring.
Thanks, Nicole. So we've been doing various forms of risk-based monitoring for quite a few years now. I know that the traditional way of monitoring was not the gold standard for delivering quality. There's data out there to demonstrate that forming 100% SDV, for example, is not what is delivering quality in clinical trials. We see the same inspection and audit findings happening again and again. So in terms of, you've heard already from Nicole about focusing on what matters. Risk-based monitoring is all about focusing on what really matters to deliver a successful study, matters to deliver reliable data and keep patients safe in the clinical trials. So it allows the sites to spend more time on things that really matter, patient care, improving your processes and so on, and thereby facilitating greater patient centricity. And you all heard from Nicole just now about more timely review of data and how risk-based monitoring supports that. Multiple levels of the review that can be done remotely with risk-based monitoring, using a centralized review of clinical data. And so that allows much faster identification of issues so that these can be both addressed and also the process, the new way of dealing with issues is not only to fix them, but also to think about how you can stop them from happening again in order to really keep patients safe. And this is how monitoring really supports that better patient safety. And in all of that, we know that we have data now that shows that we have fewer critical audit findings. So there is better quality delivery with a risk-based approach as well. So it really supports that CRAs have quality to spend focusing on what matters, focusing on the prevention of errors in order to protect patients and produce reliable data as well. So we go on to the next slide, please. And I think we have a polling question coming up. So this question is, I have your understanding of remote data review and interactions with the CRA in a risk-based monitoring model. I've got two options, not at all, a little bit, or very much. We've talked a little bit already about how the interactions with the CRA may or may not be less frequent with a risk-based monitoring model, and this can vary a lot depending on the study. It is likely that the CRA will visit the site less often, and there'll be more of a focus on remote interactions, and CRAs will interact with you in different ways. We do have access to all of the central analytics and the results of that Nicole has just been describing. So you may have more remote interactions, like quick phone calls, just checking up on some questions to do with that review, or more structured remote monitoring visit that Nicole has just described as well. There's lots of different ways and different issues that the CRA can support you with in that, in terms of remote support, supporting you with queries and following up and training and things like that. We have the result of the poll now, and what we can see here is that nobody out of the group that did respond have said that it hasn't changed, that their understanding hasn't changed, which is great. And it's kind of more or less 50-50 between the understanding of data review and CRA interactions within this model, a little or very much. So it's good to see that's a positive. So all of you that have participated in that poll, and we can move on then to the next slide and talk a little bit about some common myths around a risk-based monitoring model. And we're going to spend a little while now hopefully spelling some of these myths. The first myth that you can see on the screen here is that sites need to hire monitors to do SDV that CRAs are no longer doing. So in terms of the difference between a risk-based monitoring before we had risk-based monitoring in terms of site responsibilities, that really hasn't changed. Studies have always been responsible for creating site procedures or SOPs in order to capture good quality data and perform those procedures as required by the protocol. In risk-based monitoring, this is exactly the same. The requirement around producing really responsible for your own data quality and integrity, and ensuring that the source, the sourcing follows those ALCOA principles, and that's that definition that you're seeing on the screen in terms of the data being attributable, so identifiable with a person who captured that data and the process that was performed, that the data is legible, if there's a permanent record at the site that's human readable, contemporaneous as well, that it's identified with a specific date and time, that the data is original, that's a certified copy, as correct by an authorized person for the study, and accurate as well and complete, so that there's there's no errors in the data, and if any corrections are made, that's signed and dated as well. So, of how your experience has been, I'd like maybe Crystal, you could could hear from the site perspective and what your experience has been in terms of working within a risk-based model, and the things that we see in that the CRA is no longer doing 100% SDV, and has this had any impact in how you're working and managing resourcing at your site?
First off, I don't think that sites need to hire a monitor to do what CRAs may have been doing in the past. But as I stated before, sites do need to be self-aware of high-risk areas and know what they can do to reduce those risks, monitor trends. things that our site's done for a while now is we always have a secondary person review all informed consent forms and the informed consent process before they're filed in the binder. We kind of went from just assistant who would just file things to then taking a look at it. You know, did the patient put on every page? Did they sign and date in the right areas? Did they print their name, sign, date in the right boxes? You know, every once in a while a patient will print where they're supposed to sign or whatnot. Did our coordinators tick all the boxes? Especially with consents that has to initial on every page, and we have 15, 20, 25 page consents, it is very easy to skip page. So we kind of look at all those things and just make sure our T's are crossed, our I's are dotted before we put that away. It really doesn't take a lot of time as you'd expect. It's quickly flipping through every pages, glancing down them. Once you get doing it for a little bit, you get into a groove, and it doesn't take up a whole lot of your time. We do the same thing with regulatory documents. Second look at them before we submit them, before you file away in your binder, just to make sure. Getting very picky, I'm sure everybody notices on date formats. One has to be dated in this form, one has to be dated in another, and it is something that will get regulatory documents rejected. So taking a second glance before submitting them or filing them to make sure that they're done properly. And I realize all sites are different. We actually have a data entry team that, so you have a person, a coordinator who is seeing the patient, who is writing things down on a data collection sheet or your source document. We have a second person that actually takes those documents and transcribes that information into our EDC system. What this allows us to do is you have a second pair of eyes, those documents, to make sure that the documents we have as our source documents are accurate, they're all completed, all the boxes are ticked. If the same person that saw the patient is doing the data entry, they may be just answering questions from memory, which means your source documents may have a blank line because you know what it is. You put it in the system, but don't check the box. And it just makes sure that what we cite in our paper documents or our EMR is the same as what's going into the EDC systems. We also log all of our deviations onto one spreadsheet for our trials, all our patients, and then we do review it periodically to see if there's any trends. If there is a trend showing up, even something as simple as, you know, we have a lot of phone call visits that are getting out of the window. Sometimes it's just taking a step back and saying, what can we do to fix this? Do we need to, or how do we react to that to turn those trends around? Do we need to revise a process? Do we need to retrain staff? Is there something else that we can brainstorm on, you know, try to fix that? So it's just kind of a point of identifying what trends might be and then reacting appropriately. So those are just a few of the things that our site has done. Over the years, we've kind of developed those processes in place, and they do really go along with the risk-based monitoring.
Excellent. Thank you, Crystal. So let's move on then to dispel myth number 2, and that is that site workload increases because CRAs are not on site as often. So the message here is that CRAs may not be on site as often, but I think as we've heard during this webinar so far is that we're in a different way. So it is time to adapt. Instead of the CRA being on site, they are still monitoring the study. There is central analysis that's ongoing. So data is being monitored, but in a different way. Using technology in order to embrace new ways of being able to monitor data remotely, and also more effective ways that can identify issues early and facilitate view into data issues or concerns that may not have shown up in pre-RBM days until you get to the end of the study and you're writing the study report, and then it's too late. So it is it's a different way of monitoring and doesn't necessarily translate into a difference in workload for the site. It may impact how time was previously allocated and different tasks and different ways of interacting to the CRA rather than really having an impact on the workload. So in terms of making time for interactions in order to communicate remotely with the CRA versus being there, for a day, for a full day on-site visit. So Crystal, do you have anything there about what your experience has been at your site? Have you noticed any change in workload when you're working on RBM than when you were working pre-RBM days?
Yeah, the changes, and a lot of it is it's different. Like you said before, you allocate your time differently. Kind of as a breakdown, when you have a monitor on site, the monitor gets there, we have to do things like we have to reserve a room, we have to make sure have somewhere to go. You have to request EMR access from our site. That's going through our help desk with our IT department, get that all set up. You have to pull IP, sometimes from a pharmacy, sometimes from your own rooms. You have to pull all the binders, put it in the room. Once the monitor gets there, usually it's a good 15 minutes. You just do your welcome, your little bit of small talk. You make sure that they remember where the bathrooms are, the break room is. You take them to their room. During the day, we generally check up on them at least every hour. That checkup, you get away from your desk, you go walk down the hall. How are you doing? Do you have any questions? That usually takes 5 to 10 minutes of your time away from your normal job, even if the monitor says, no, I don't have any questions at this time. So again, if they're here for an hour a day and you check up on them, for 10 minutes every time, that's 70 minutes of your time, plus 10, 15 minutes for the welcome and all the prep time that you had to do before they're coming. So that's a lot of time. On a remote call, you still have to pull binders, but in our experience, there's only specific binders because they would specifically tell you, we want to look at patient 1 and 8 or something like that. We have to, we'll open up the EDC system. We always like to have a copy of our previous monitor letters open. So we do pull things, but not as much. In a remote call, you don't have to do things. We don't have to grant access. We don't have to contact our IT department. We don't have to reserve rooms. You don't have to do that welcome thing. You don't have to check on them all the way through the time. Generally, the calls that I've seen are 30 or 60 minutes or less. So really, the amount of time that you spend on a remote call is a lot less on site, even though sometimes it doesn't really feel like it because it feels different that it's a call. But if you step back and look at it, it usually is less staff time to do that. So it's kind of what we saw is it's not that the workload increases, it's that it's just different. And I think if you are prepared and you step back and look at it, it does take less time for a remote call than on site.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Crystal. So now hand over to Nicole to dispel another couple of myths.
Thanks. So this myth is RBM requires faxing or scanning of source documents or hours of phone with the CRAs. And I think that, the things that we heard in Crystal's response just a second ago is that, it really isn't hours on the phone with the CRAs. And I think of maybe a few examples of where we might spend more time on the phone than 30 minutes. But those are usually with sites where we've identified a lot of problems, a lot of deviation trends, and where we really want to spend time with the site staff and try to understand what the root cause of these trends are and what is the process that's being conducted. Where is that process breaking that we're seeing these deviations? Those types of discussions that might make a phone call a little bit more lengthy, but what we see is that if we invest in one of those calls one time that's a little bit longer, that really drives down into understanding what that process failure is and what can we do to improve upon it. What we see is that in the long run, saves both the CRA and the site time in preventing future deviations, preventing discussions on future deviations, preventing RB communications about those future potential deviations, and really it's time well invested. So it's not every remote monitoring visit that's going to result in a lengthy time on site. It really is when there's some pretty significant issues or trends that are identified, and we want to sit down and work with the site, getting to the bottom of it and understanding what practical things can be done to bring sites back into compliance. I think that answers the question about the hours on site. The faxing and scanning of source documents, and we're not looking to verify those things in documents remotely. And I think that early on, I will admit, probably 8 to 10 years ago when we first started thinking about remote monitoring or risk-based monitoring, there were absolutely studies and times where we would request faxing and scanning of a lot of documents. We should absolutely be seeing less and less and less of that, to the point where it really is not standard process against any of the major CRAs they've talked to our clients. That's a routine practice for faxing and scanning. Now, we know it does exist from time to time. There are probably CRAs who are overly anxious themselves about not looking at things remotely. In those cases, we are working internally with CRAs so that they're relying on data in EDC and other systems and the centralized monitors to be picking on those trends and worrying so much about having to see some of that source documentation. That source view really should be linked to the time that we are spending on site. We may see IVs occurring more frequently at the beginning of the trial so that we can verify eligibility, so that we can verify that your source document meets those ALCOA requirements of being attributable, complete, etc. But we really shouldn't see really significant requests for faxing and scanning of source documents. I can envision wanting to help a site perhaps that has had a hard time completing the drug accountability record, for example. And maybe every time we go out to a site visit, we explain that drug accountability record. We know it's complicated. We know it's a problem. Every time we go out, we end up generating 50 queries and asking them to make 100 changes to that drug accountability record. There are ways that we can ask them to fax in the next one that they do during a remote monitoring visit so that we can take a look at it and make sure they've got it down and prevent them from repeating those mistakes 100 times. So I think that's a legitimate request. It would be very few pieces of paper. Typically, we would document those and request in a confirmation letter ahead of time so that you can prepare for that. But it certainly shouldn't be a bunch of information. It really is no longer kind of that standard thought process around how that's done. Melissa or Crystal, what are your experiences with this?
This is Melissa. I agree. With risk-based monitoring, there are less requests for scanning and faxing. Next, usually a log or two that they want to see. As you mentioned, occasionally a 5-minute phone call may result in no follow-up activity at the site, but once it's done, that might be every now and then, not after every call. And I think, though, they're different, so the complexity of the activity will vary from site to site. It might be more difficult for site to have to electronic records, the same in an academic setting, whereas private practice and made a dedicated research site, might be easier to meet requests and scan and fax logs, because access to the source and to the patient records would be easier.
To myth number 4. And myth is that the sites won't receive the support needed now that the CRA visits are less frequent. And I think through a lot of the discussion we've already had today that, you know, the CRAs and the support from CROs and sponsors is different. It's not going away. I think we've clarified that with some of the discussion that we've had to this point. But Melissa, tell me your experience in real life has been with RBM. You know, are you seeing that because the CA visits are less frequent, that you feel like you're missing out on that support?
Not at all. As a matter of fact, I feel that we have more support. Before, you really just relied on the monitor's visit to address all your concerns and your questions. Now with remote monitoring, my experience has been every 2 weeks, so it's easier to keep a list of ongoing questions to see remote monitor before the call and just address everything every 2 weeks. The other experience we've had that is a good one, if the site monitor is traveling, they're hard to reach. You have a question that needs to be addressed right away. So it's easier to reach out to the remote monitor to get questions answered. So I find that we have more support and more people to call on.
Great, thank you. And next slide here is polling question number 3. And so what we want to ask this time is, based on some of the discussions that we've had, do you have better ideas for making changes at your site in order to accommodate risk-based monitoring? So has helped you come up with ideas around changes you might want to make to preparation for on-site remote IEs, to different roles and responsibilities of existing team members within your site, like Crystal's suggestion of checking informed consents, or making adjustments to SOPs or WPDs, perhaps even looking at adding some change management to your study staff, or providing them training on trend analysis for deviations, or how to perform root cause analysis and process improvement when trends are identified by a monitor. So think about some of those things, and I'll pose the question back to Melissa and Crystal. You know, as we've spent the last couple of weeks preparing for the presentation today, are there some things that you've thought of that you'll be taking as additional steps for your sites in preparing for RBM?
Well, as I had mentioned before, when we do the site initiation visit, we identify our own, I'll say, risk-based areas. But it'd be nice to ask the monitor for indicators that they've identified for the protocol, and share those with the site. And I think we can prevent more deviations and just have better quality data if we know where the risk, what the indicators are. Thought I had when I was mentioning, if traveling, we have access to the remote monitor. However, if they're on a call, to anyone. So I think it would be a great idea to have a more complete contact list. I'm finding now in my 20 years that today we have more access to more people. Sometimes, though, the list that's provided is limited, so it would be too oriented to the site. It's advantage to have a long list of people to contact when there's a question, and those questions usually arise when there's at a patient visit. If there's an issue, do we minimize this patient? Do we go and dose the patient? So questions that need immediate answers, and it's just not to know that we have a list of people to contact.
Thank you. And it's like from our poll that a majority of you have picked up a few little ideas on making some changes. Several of you have also come up with a handful of other things, so very much in having some better ideas for making changes. So hopefully this was beneficial in coming up with some of those ideas. I realize we're running low on time, so we just have a couple of quick takeaways, and I'll turn this back over to my colleague for.
Thank you. As you heard, there are different experiences out there. This is still a work in progress. That's an important key takeaway. Different companies are really piloting and exploring different solutions. So they have varying experiences with each sponsor company or CRO, depending on what they're piloting. But remember, we are not abandoning you. In fact, we are implementing processes such as central monitoring to really support you even more. And the core values haven't changed in that we all are focused on improved quality, safeguarding human subject protection, and ensuring the reliability of the trial results. And it does require looking at some of your operational structures to accommodate some of the remote aspects of the study. All in all, we value your input. We hope that this was helpful, and we want to thank you for all that you do because we would not be able to do this without you. And feedback and ideas are always welcome. And so it's just our disclosure slide, and this is the four modules provided in the series. If you're unable to attend the previous sessions or would like to revisit any of the previous sessions, you can review the recordings received as part of your registration, and Mike might have more on that. But for your time and interest, we do hope that this will enhance your knowledge and give you thought on how you can successfully operationalize RBM at your site. I think we have questions. We do. I'll hand it over to you. Or do we?
We have a question about the remote monitoring and how that impacts the regulatory document collection process, and how does it impact the regulatory binder and sponsor file reconciliation. So thanks for that question. And how this works in a risk-based monitoring model, where you have activities that need to be done at site, where CRA needs to physically be at site to collect certain documents that need to come in-house, if they need to be additional documents, if there's those kind of activities are managed by a CRA during an on-site visit. And if there's a need for it to be on-site, then a CRA will have a pool of visits that they can use in order to achieve that. So it's enhancing quality, it's enhancing inspection readiness. That's the focus of this type of monitoring. So there is all of that planning around what will be done when a CRA is on site, and what a CRA can do remotely is a part of this process, and planning around the visits and the type of visits that are needed. And I have a question around how the remote visit, and how that works in practice. So maybe you'd like to address that one?
Yep, that one. So the question, as it was written, was on the remote call, how is information shared between site and sponsor and CRO? Is it via WebEx where the site is showing their screen to show info and systems, et cetera? This is kind of near and dear to my heart. I am hoping and praying that as we go further with this, that everybody does embrace technologies better. I would love to have calls be able to WebEx. There always seems to be a few documents that I'm asked to scan in and email just so that monitors or CROs can put their eyes on it as it sits today. And I think it would be great to be able to do a WebEx to see the face. They can see our face. If they want to see what the delegation log looks like today, you can hold it up, you can share it, you can share a screen. I'm really hoping they can work towards that way. As it is now, I have not seen it. Typically what I do with, or what I see with the calls, it is strictly on the phone. We really even do like a WebEx, it's just phone calls. So I'm really hoping that we can explore those options in the future.
Crystal. Any questions?
There's another question from Lauren about she's only ever been exposed to risk-based monitoring and she's new to research, and what were the monitoring processes like in the past? In the past, what we'd seen traditionally, that the only time you would really review things with the monitors when they were on site, and they would look at everything. They would look at, some studies would look at every single patient, 100% verification, you know, where they would sit down, they have access to your EMR or your paper records, they look at your research records, they're looking in the EDC, they're trying to match up all the data, they're looking at the paper copies of your regulatory binder and doing that all in person, where the risk-based monitor is kind of taking some of that where we can do it remotely. Kind of answers your question.
This is Nicole. I'm going to add on to that a little more. I think in the traditional model, there was no waiting. So site waiting isn't wait. In the sites, we're all treated the same. So students would go out to sites every 4 to 6 weeks, whether the site was a good, better, good site or a challenge site. And in this model, it's more focused. So sites that are doing well will have visits as needed. Sites that need additional support will get visits more often. So there is a sort of a hierarchy as far as site performance goes. And I think that in the traditional model, there wasn't that. It was really just everybody out every 4 to 6 weeks, whether the site really needed it or not.
Yes, I want to add that with risk-based monitoring, the deviations are, the amount of deviations are minimized because they're addressed almost immediately. In traditional monitoring, you wait next visit, which might be 6 weeks away. So during that period, you're making the same mistake over and over and over again. So this way, if there is a deviation, it's identified immediately and just occurs once.
Well, thank you, everyone, for your participation today, and thank you to my co-panelists as well. It's a great pleasure working with you in helping the industry move forward with RBM. Nycole, any part words from SCR? Thank you for partnering with RO Forum on these webinars.
Oh, our pleasure. And I just one, in addition to my regular closing comments, I just want to ask for the attendees on to all the questions in the final survey. The ACRO and the sites they brought along to assist did a lot of work putting this series together, and so would really appreciate your feedback there. So, and thanks a lot, everyone, for this has been a really great little series here. Attendees, when post-webinar survey pops up, you can complete those to get your contact hour credit. If you have any problem with that, just send me an email. We always get a few that for some reason they pop-up blocker or something prevents the survey questions from opening. For more good technology, clinical business practices, and other topics, see the SCRS Insight Journal. We publish that quarterly for members. You can find that in the members section of our website, myscrs.org. I look forward to seeing all of you at the Asia Pacific Summit, a conference series entirely focused on the needs of clinical research sites. We appreciate everyone's participation in today's program. We look forward to bringing you more educational offerings during the year. Today's session has been recorded, and we forward the link to you within the next 24 hours. We look for feedback, and thank you again for joining us. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.